Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We're going to wrap up this week with an album review, which is where I listen to an entire album track by track, exploring what each song does in isolation and it's part of the larger artwork. Today we're going to be looking at what I think is going to be our first Vocaloid album review on the channel ever. We're going to be looking at Utsu-P, who we actually checked out on a recent live stream, I believe as well. This album, I think, is also another first for the channel. It is the shortest gap that we've had between a release and an album review. This actually came out just a couple of days ago. So, let's dive into this. We have 43 minutes of music ahead of us across 13 songs. Most of these are in the 2 to 3 minute range. I'm hoping there's a bit of variety on this, but let's just dive in and see what's going on. Kicking off with the first track, which is called The Berserk Gene. Right off the bat, kicking off with a lot of intensity, build up. Nice little breakbeat there to go with this. Oh, that's a very cool effect. Yeah, the rhythmic vocal cadence. Okay, this is going heavier than I expected. Little fake outs there. Oh, an extended build-up into the chorus. Okay, so yeah, that's the same post-chorus from last time. Okay, I'm in for a treat. I'm in for a very big treat. I have one question though. Is this Vocaloid? The chorus absolutely sounds like it. I'm not saying someone couldn't perform those parts, but if there is a real vocalist behind them, there is quite a bit of production put on top of it in order for the, perfect, like sonic perfect cuts between syllables for that rapid fire delivery. I think generally speaking, just breath and sound that reverberates around where we're in. All of these little details are going to muddy that up a little bit where you're going to have to chop it up. And I think that given how short they are, you're either going to have somebody who is phenomenally perfect pitch, or you're going to have to do a tad bit of pitch correction on that as well. Which is actually par for the course for a lot of vocalists and a lot of styles of music anyways. A tad bit of pitch correction is it's just normal these days. Not even talking about like full, what people incorrectly label the auto-tune sound, but just, you know, making it a little bit less, a little more flawless. We'll put it that way. Very common sound these days. It is possible that this is a real human here in the in the chorus. The verse to me just sounds Vocaloid-ish, but I also assume you could make this sound with a real vocal and then production afterwards. But what really stands out to me is the bridge. The part with the quasi-harsh vocal thing going on. It's stuffed really far into the mix, so I can't tell precisely what's going on there, but there is a white noise, a crackling sound that is accompanying the vocals. Whether this is a secondary layer, or if it is traditional harsh vocals, or at least what sounds to me, there's a bit of compression going on here, and you know, maybe a little bit of overdrive on the vocal track done in production, not by the vocalist. Regardless, it's a unique kind of harsh vocal sound that I find I've heard in pop metal groups who will use digitization of the vocals in order to achieve something similar to what a harsh vocalist would be achieving texturally without actually performing a harsh vocal. But there are breaths here. There's a variety of breaths here. Before each harsh vocal, there's an inhale. Not a super shallow one, but not a deep inhale either. It feels like something that I would expect a real vocalist doing harsh vocals to do and sound like. Now, conversely, as I was talking about earlier, that the vocals sounded like Vocaloids, but it could have been a real person. This sounds like a real person, but I assume can also be Vocaloid. I don't keep up with Vocaloid technology, but I do know a couple of years ago, I was looking at synthetic voice software, and it came quite a far way from what I had originally remembered. I don't know, like a decade ago when I first explored some of this stuff. It doesn't surprise me that you can make Vocaloid sound more human, that you can introduce breath and stuff like that to the software now. So, I don't know. Is this a Vocaloid? Is it not? I'm going to have to look into some personnel when I dive into the lyrics on this and kind of see if I can figure out exactly what's going on there. I'm just, it's, what would you call it when you can't tell what reality is? That's where I'm at right now with this music. I don't know what's real and what's not. But I do know that this is really great music. It definitely sits in the more mainstream area of metal. Something along the lines of melodic metalcore, or possibly alternative metal is a really good title for this style of music right here. It does carry some core ideas inside of it. The melodies for the vocals remind me of post-hardcore melodies more than metallic melodies. We also have the breakdown in a couple of places. We have the very typical post-hardcore buildup, which actually metalcore does this a lot too. Just a lot of core-related genres of music. And kind of bring the energy down, bring it up, hit the peak, fill in an empty space, and allow the chorus to punch in after that. It works phenomenally well. It's pretty much a cliche in more mainstream styles of aggressive music, but it is a cliche, it is a trope because it works so well. Songs like this just absolutely get me into the mood, whether it is punching into the chorus or coming in out of the chorus with that, again, like 2 beats of silence. Maybe the vocals are in there, and then that really heavy da-da-don, da-da-don, da-da-don. I mean, that comes in and it's just like, you get pumped. You're in the moment. You got to move to that. It's such an infectious style of metal. From the top, to the bottom, from the beginning to the end. Everything in here, to me at least, seems explicitly designed for maximum engagement for the widest net possible of an audience. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what Utsu-P went out of their way to do, to make a very palatable style of metal, but I do believe that a lot of ideas in here are. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this, just as I also believe that a lot of metal purists are not going to enjoy it. For, I mean, kind of the same ideas here. When you look at the production of this, it's very pristine. The drums, they're not, I mean, I was going to say that the drums are triggered, but that I don't think is necessarily accurate either, because I don't think that there was ever a drum kit being played here. Maybe there was, but everything in here sounds digital to me. So, you know, having a static attack level for all the drum parts, I mean, that's one of the things that I always hear metal purists talk about, is that they like real drums because there's a fluctuation to the velocity, which is just how loud the attack is. You usually don't get too much of that when it's digital. It's a bit more of a quantized sound, and everything in here feels like it was touched by a producer in order to achieve perfection, fluidity, and consistency above all else, rather than something more human, more flawed, more varied. This is something that I have seen when we've talked about modern metalcore and alternative metal bands. It's one of the things that I see brought up the most is that the vocals are fine. Sometimes the cleans are a little poppy. People can usually get past that. The guitars, they're fine. But the drums, it's always the drums that people seem to get hung up on. And, you know, I get it. When you have a specific thing that just doesn't click for you, I get it. It's a very difficult hurdle to get over. But I find it interesting that it's the drums, not the riffs, not the melodies. It's the production on the drums that people really find to be a hurdle. Like I said, I get it. It seems kind of funny when you kind of put it into words like this, but I do get it. I do understand. So we do have this whole angle that it is a very mainstream palatable metal, for better or worse. It's going to, I think, attract a lot of people, but it's also going to push away people for that sound, for what it's doing, which I guess is something that you can say about every genre and every style. I don't even know why I'm bringing it up. All right, getting outside of the digital elements here and the production and the sound of everything, musically, compositionally, what's going on here? A lot of texture work, a lot of atmospheric work, a lot of energy. That's really the word I want to describe this song most in, because the riffs and the drum patterns, like a lot of alternative and mainstream metal, they're kind of secondary. They're there to add flavor. The guitars have a nice grit. They have that sharpness of the overdrive and the compression, but it's really shaved down a little bit. It's not as sharp as it could be. So the sound is there. We have the metallic sound adding to this otherwise very poppy style of music. The drums are there to give the aggressive drum patterns. Not to be super expressive, not to have ridiculously cool drum fills or melodic drumming or anything like that. They're there to keep a beat and for their sound to be crisp and aggressive. That snare drum needs to crack. The bass needs to be overwhelming at the low end. It needs to have that metallic sound. What's being played by the guitars, the bass, and the drums doesn't really matter that much. Do we have aggressive sounding riffs? Do we have aggressive sounding instruments? Yes, then we're good. And that's honestly it. I couldn't hum any of the guitar melodies to you. Nothing in there was really memorable from that perspective. Well, other than the bridge, the breakdown section. That's kind of stuck in my head a little bit, but that was, you know, a breakdown. It's one note with a rhythm. Once again, not really melodically focused, but texture and rhythm focused. Beyond that, we have the vocals, which I do find to be very interesting, much like a lot of, and I swear I won't say this as often moving forward, but like a lot of mainstream metal. we will find that the vocals are the star. Everything else sets the atmosphere up, it gives it the metallic flavor, and then we have the vocals. And the vocals here, like a lot of alternative metal, is clean vocals. Something to, again, be palatable to as many people as possible. I'm not saying, again, that these bands who make this type of music are expressly going in this direction for as wide of an appeal within the metal category as they can get. It's simply the music that they're making. And we do have infectious, catchy vocals in here, whether it is the verse or the rhythmically intense chorus from the vocals. They're always a highlight of the song. Production-wise, they're a highlight of the song compositionally. Everything is built to put your ear looking towards these vocal melodies and to really take them as the element that is most in the spotlight. And as such, I don't really think that there's a lot to dive into then from a compositional standpoint on like individual riff or individual melodic concepts. But I do want to touch on emotion. And again, stuff like this, I don't really feel a strong emotional energy to, much like a lot of more traditional metal. It just kind of sounds aggressive to me at most times. But I will say, bringing this word back, energy is the key here. We have a start to the song that is full of tension, full of possibility. It is potential energy ready to become kinetic. You can feel the buildup. You can feel it's going to get somewhere, but it isn't there yet. When the song does burst into that verse, though, it's driving, it's energetic, there's a ton of momentum, it has a nice speed to it, and it just feels... bouncy is not the right word for it, because I think that implies a sort of like poppiness to it, which there is a little bit of poppy writing in the melodies, but it's just driving. It's just momentum. It has a good bit of energy to it, and it is a fun, light sound despite the heavier guitar tones, despite the aggressive drum tones. We have an escalation of energy until we hit actually we have a flat of energy. It's kind of consistent until we hit the pre-chorus. This is rising tension. We kind of bring the energy up. We have rising pitch, rising volume. We do have that gap of silence before the chorus kicks in, and then we hit 10. And we're just a flat 10 for the entirety of the chorus. This is the song. We have some energy, we build it up, we hit peak, we hold that energy, we drop it down. We hold that energy, build it up, hit peak, hold that energy, and then drop it down. That's the entirety of the song. It's a verse, chorus, post-chorus, verse, chorus, post-chorus. The song is done. It's only 2.5 minutes long. It's all about riding this wave of adrenaline. And it does a phenomenal job of that. So much of this just makes me want to move my body to it. And it just feels good to listen to. I know we've talked about this song for quite a bit longer than the song actually is in length. Although I'm quite surprised it's only been 16 or so minutes here. But I don't think that this is a song that really deserves, a full 30 minutes to discuss. It is a song that is simple, fun to listen to, and energetic. It's what people would call, a good gym song right here. It just drives you, just pushes you forward. It's not really doing anything deep, but what it does really well. Let me hit some lyrics on this, and then we'll continue on. I was hoping that the popularity of Utsu-P would mean that there are some hand-translated lyrics out there, but it just dawned on me again that this is a brand new album. Hand translations take time. So we are using generated translations from Google Translate. Hopefully this will work well enough for our needs today. This song is about needing to push forward because of an emptiness inside. It says, why do I keep fighting like this? I'm told nothing will ever be born, but if I stop fighting, it feels like nothing will be created. So I keep going. Where am I? Who am I? How far will I continue to walk? This, I believe, was in the pre-chorus, the build-up section, and it is already in English, so we have a back and forth on Japanese and English lyrics already. The chorus says, even if I'm stuck, if I don't give up and keep persisting, what could possibly be the value? I kept trembling, lost in a foggy self-delusion where no one's worth can be expressed like numbers in a game. Even if I reach someone's answer, I won't fall into emptiness, so I keep searching for an effect that will break it all. This basically says that when I get lost, when I get stuck, it says, what is the point of just allowing myself to be like that, to be stuck, to be lost, to just dwell in this moment? He says, when I find those moments when I feel the weakest, the most empty, I persevere, I push out of them because there's no worth in being in moments like that. He says, so I will keep searching for an effect that breaks the emptiness. The way I see this is a way of pushing through, to push past a feeling of negativity, to find something more worthwhile in the life. That's pretty much the whole song right there. I think it's a good message here. Kind of surface level. When you feel bad, just push through it. Or at least that's what I kind of do. It's a good message to always remember that when you get knocked down, to get back up. No matter how many times you get knocked down, because being on the floor doesn't help anyone. And the music, being so driving and forward momentum, works really well at pairing with and accompanying this lyrical message. So, let's dive into this next track. I can't pronounce it. It's not in Romaji, so there's a few of these that aren't. So, I guess just a couple here then. Tracks 2 and 5. Oh, there's even some tracks that their titles are in English. So, okay, this won't be as bad as I thought it was going to be. All right, anyways, let's just dive into track 2 and see what's going on there. Oh. Yeah, there's a little break there. Once again, a lot of build-up. Is that a Vocaloid? Not singing words, but making noises? Oh. Oh, that's kind of fun. Really fun back and forth on the vocals there. That's just the fun part right there. Another fake out. We had that on the first song too. Going into the final chorus had an extended build-up. All right, that was cool. A couple of neat things on this track that I think really work well is the use of electronic music alongside what sounds to me like guitars and drums. Now, this also existed on the first, but I was so overwhelmed by other things that I didn't really pay a lot of attention to it, unfortunately. And it's something that I'm going to probably pick up on more and just kind of retroactively remember was in other tracks. I'll hopefully remember. Anyways. Regardless, the guitars, the bass, the drums, they do give us this metal foundation to it all, but there's also a lot of glitch and synth ideas going on in this track as well, and it adds so much flavor to the song. It's these little spices all over the places. It's the sharp cutoffs for instruments. It's the little textures, little ornamental ideas that appear around everything else. It's little twinklings and scratches and flips and whatever other sounds are at Utsu-P's disposal here. And it elevates this track. This could very well be a rather straightforward alternative metal song, and it isn't. It isn't because the production is there to elevate it. It isn't just that because the additional instrumentation is there, but there's also a clarity of vision to when and how to use these different sounds, because you can certainly go overboard with this. Something that I've mentioned whenever we talk about electronic music is just the sheer vastness of instrumentation. You can make whatever sounds you want. I mean, if you're writing classical music with classical instrumentation, you got like 24 instruments that are going to be commonly used in that setting. That's it. You write for those instruments. If you need a specific sound, you figure out which instrument matches the sound in your head or in your vision. When it comes to electronic instrumentation, the composition is one piece of the puzzle. The other piece is what instrument. And usually the part of that process is what instrument are you going to build for this melody or this loop or whatever. And so we do have a plethora of sounds, whether they are samples or homemade synth tones or whatever. They're all over the place and they augment everything. In fact, I think at times they either share the same spotlight with the guitars or sometimes are even a little louder than them, because the spice is what makes it more interesting. It's what keeps the ears engaged. Because honestly, the guitar riff, I think in this one, especially at the beginning of the track, was more intriguing. I was grooving with, especially the intro riff went really good, really hard, and I liked it. Once again, though, building up energy. But by itself, it's just a fine riff, 6 to 7 out of 10, right? If I was rating riffs, solid, keeps the song moving, doesn't disrupt anything, but isn't particularly new or fresh. It's good. It's good. But then you mix it with the textures and you bring these effects around it and you kind of warp all this stuff around it, but you produce it in a way that everything feels intertwined. It isn't two separate ideas. It's one idea supporting another. And that's where I think this music, I'm not even going to say this song, this album as a whole so far, the 6 minutes we've listened to, it's elevated because of this marriage of electronics, sonic capabilities and strengths with metal's general electricity and vibe and energy, and bringing the two together in a way that feels driving. It feels heavy, it feels aggressive, but it's also ear candy at every single corner. There are very few places through this song where I feel like I am becoming bored in any manner. My ears are always locking onto so many different sounds or textures or instruments or ideas or transitions or effects. There's just always something new to listen to. The song moves forward at a blistering pace, and verse, chorus, the song's done. I don't even know where the last 30 minutes have gone because the music is it just goes so fast. And of course, I kind of blank out when I talk. It's really weird. I have no sense of time when I discuss this stuff. I'll just look at the timer that we've been recording. I'm like, dude, it's really been an hour? It feels like I've been talking for 10 minutes. So between the music just being very infectious, very in the moment, I'm locked into it because there's always something new to check out. And me just blanking out when I talk, it really hasn't felt like I've been here for 30 minutes already. And usually the music is a place where time feels like time for me in these videos. And here it doesn't. It's infectious. It's robbing me of time. Powerful music. Another thing that I really like about this, and I'm seeing a pattern of in both of these tracks, is highly rhythmic vocal work, which I actually think we heard this in other Utsu-P stuff as well. Like I said, we checked them out in live stream recently. I don't think we've done a full reaction to an Utsu-P track before. Let's find out. Nope. But maybe it is just that song from the live stream I'm thinking of then. I really love rhythmic vocal stuff. Rap, very good at changing up rhythmic ideas and flow. Even harsh vocals. I think one of the coolest things to do with harsh vocals is to introduce rhythmic syncopation and to, well, kind of like rap, changing up your flow. You don't have a melodic quality, so you really got to focus on that rhythmic one. And I feel like it's a place where a lot of harsh vocalists just don't. And I wish more did. I can only think of I don't know, 3, 4 harsh vocalists maybe that really focus on rhythmic side of things rather than textural side. But I even love it in clean vocal stuff. It's just really infectious to use that other third part of music, melody, harmony, and rhythm, and to really use that part in the clean vocals. And we get some really cool ideas in here. In fact, at one point, we even went to a bit of a popular sound of the 2010s, which is the Scottish snaps. It is it's one short note and another short note that takes up a bit of space. You can also think of it as 2 short notes with a gap of space after it. And then it's a repetition of that. So you get da-da, 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 da-da. This showed up a lot in hip hop and I'd even say like R&B and pop music for a little bit in the 2010s. It became very popular a while ago. I think it's infectious. It's a very cool rhythm. And we saw it in here, which I think this might be the first time I've heard the Scottish snaps in a Vocaloid setting. Although that doesn't really say much because I've only heard half a dozen Vocaloid tracks at this point. So yeah, definitely need to spend some more time with this area of music. That's for sure. Otherwise, though, aside from noticing some more production stuff and some rhythmic stuff that's going on in here, this song to me feels a lot like the first one. The driving energy throughout, carefully crafted rising and falling energy so that we can maintain these peak 10 intensity moments at times without it becoming the norm and kind of losing its edge because of that. So we bring the energy down, we find midpoints, we find low points, sort of just bounce between the 3 of those. I even mentioned that structurally this has sort of the same types of buildups with the same gaps before big punchy sections. This is also, I think in electronic terms, you would call this the drop. but I don't think the drop requires that pocket of silence. I just think that that accentuates the punch when you hit the peak. Because not only are you rising in energy, but you also drop to 0 momentarily before you hit that 10. So it really accentuates it. It is a phenomenal technique, but one that is certainly, I don't know if I'd say overused, but heavily used in a lot of music for the fact that it's effective. We did get to hear some new vocal types in here. There's the whispering vocals too. And speaking of that, I forgot to look up personnel list. I do see though, Spotify says that Hatsune Miku sang this one, but the last track was Kagamine Rin and Kagamine Len. Are those Vocaloids too? Hatsune Miku shows up on 2 more tracks after this one. We also have what looks to be Havoc, but spelled with an X instead of an A. We have Miyamai Mocha, Zundamon, and 2, 3, maybe 4 vocalists that I can't pronounce. So, and that's interesting too, because Vocaloid software is quite varied and there's a lot of it. Is everything on here going to be Vocaloid? But they're using different softwares for different songs to achieve different sounds. I'll be completely honest, the vocals here didn't sound too different from the vocals in the last song, but that might be more of an acclimation thing where I'm still rather fresh to this Vocaloid area of music, that maybe where the differences are between the Vocaloids as far as like the nuance of sound goes, I'm not familiar enough with them to notice the nuances. But I am kind of curious going forward if I'll be able to hear differences in the vocalist as we go through this album. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up too about vocals. I can't remember what it was. Well, maybe I'll remember when I'm reading the lyrics. Let me dive into those. All right, so I looked up a little bit about these Vocaloids. Kagamine Rin and Kagamine Len are both Vocaloids produced from the same company that developed Hatsune Miku. And interestingly enough, they even released around the same time, with Miku being released in August of 2007, and the 2 Kagamine Vocaloids being released in December of the same year. I also found something that makes a lot of sense, but honestly I never thought about. It tells who voices the Vocaloids. This makes sense. The human voice had to have come from somewhere to be modulated into the software to then be modulated in whatever way that the composer wants to use the Vocaloid software. But it just never really dawned on me that much like you would sample an instrument to create a virtual instrument, you would sample the human voice in order to create a Vocaloid. Also, both of the Kagamine Vocaloids are voiced by the same person, which I think is really interesting too, because it makes me wonder if it's a production side of things that differentiates the 2 Kagamine Vocaloids, or if it is a natural production thing where the vocalist who voiced both of them use different techniques or inflections or maybe even voices in order to create the 2 different Vocaloids, or even more. I don't know how common it is for one person to voice multiple Vocaloids. So this is all very eye-opening for me. I'm going to assume then that moving forward, all of the other guests, yeah, there's a featured person on every single track. I'm going to assume that they're all just listing the Vocaloids, which is an interesting concept in and of itself, because if, well, I use Connect. No, that doesn't sound right. Contact. Native Instruments makes a VST library bank called Contact, and I typically use the instruments in that for my music. And when I make music, I don't typically say featuring, Native Instruments Contact version 7 or whatever. From one perspective, Vocaloids are just a virtual instrument. It's a sampled instrument. The instrument just happens to be the human voice, but we gave names to them. And I suppose from one perspective, it makes sense to list them as a featured artist, but they're just a tool. It's just software, no different. You don't see the, Utsu-P featuring this drum kit. So that's interesting. I'm curious where everyone else kind of sits on that. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to it. It just feels weird to me. Like, I could see why you would do it, but I also see why you wouldn't do that. And it puts me in the middle place where I don't know if it's worth really investigating too much, but I don't know how to feel about it. Anyways, hitting up the lyrics here. There are probably half of these tracks that have English hand-translated lyrics. I'm excited about that. I'm assuming these might have been singles where the translation could already have been done. I don't know, but it when I was looking through, it was probably about half of the tracks had it. So the other half I'll use Google Translate, but for a song like this, I think we're going to get a very clear image of what the lyrics are trying to say, what kind of themes they're working within. And this one is kind of the same thing as the Berserk gene. The official translation for this track is called Fuel, and it's about burning brightly. The beginning of the song in English states, burn more. That's what I was burned for. That's what I was born for. And it repeats this 3 times. From here, the first verse says, every time my weak self is affirmed, I felt pain as if I was confined to the image of my weak self. I want to try erasing my weak points. So once again, when I'm down, it gets to me. But I don't want to, I don't want to get knocked down that often. I want to erase the parts where I feel like I'm weakest and build myself up from there. The chorus says, I'm singing praises to the remainder of my finite life. I'm reaching my hand out to what seems infinite. I'm seizing and crushing the fears I counted with my fingers, grab glory by its neck and pin it down. No need for superficial cheering. The real pleasure can be found in the bulky trash you guys don't care about. There's no need for baseless cheering or weak-willed pessimism. The moment of resolving my indescribable irritation has my heart pounding. Generally speaking here, this is grab life by the horns. It's saying that you need to crush your fears and just go in and do whatever you need to make your life better, to make it be what you thought it was supposed to be. It says you can grab glory by the neck and pin it down. To wrestle the best parts of life and to wrestle success into your life. It says, I don't need pessimism. I don't need superficial cheering. I just need what's real and positive in my life. We see later on, he says, it's not mere ignorance. I have an impulse to step forward, even though it's shown to be bitter and sweet. And I really like that line, that there's an understanding that not everything is going to be perfect. That even striving for beauty and joy and positivity in your life, sometimes even ignoring the completely negative moments, you're still going to get bittersweet sections of your life. Where, yeah, you went for something good, it is good, it's fantastic, but it also brought something negative with it. But he says, even despite that, I know that that's going to happen. I know life is not going to be perfect. He says, I'm not doing this in ignorance. He says, but I need to. He says, fill that tank from top to bottom and your chances of winning is certain. Bask in the praises. Just live life to its fullest. That's what this song is about. Like I said, it's a good companion track to the Berserk gene, which kind of captured that same feeling. Sometimes life gets you down, but you gotta keep going. Or I suppose technically both of these songs are very personal to Utsu-P. It's not necessarily a general concept of, hey man, when life gets you down, you gotta keep going. But he's specifically saying when life gets me down, I have to keep going. These are songs that are very much about him, and if you relate to it, cool. But if you don't, that's cool too, because they're not really for you. It's not general advice songs. It's not feel-good tracks. This is just Utsu-P expressing himself and telling people what he does in his life and why all of this is important to him. All right. Let's see if this trend continues with the next track called Gorgon. This one also has Hatsune Miku on it on vocals, and here I am talking about her like she's a real vocalist. This is the longest track on the album, just over 4 minutes long. We got a real epic here for you prog fans. Oh, geez. All right, let's dive into it and see what Utsu-P is bringing to us next. Ooh. Lots of glitch, cool rhythmic devices. Lots of tension in the atmosphere. Okay, that's why this sounds familiar. This was the song we checked out on live stream on August 24th. A complete extra 8 bars on that pre-chorus compared to the first transition into the chorus. There's delayed attack coming in on 2 instead of 1. Ooh, tempo shift? I remember that now. And another tempo shift. I remember that from the stream. Not all of it, but the verse, for whatever reason, really clicked with me. And once the chorus kicked in, I was like, yeah, dude, I've heard this before. I had to go look. Like I said, I think it was August 20 something, 24th was the live stream that we checked this specific song out on. And dude, I still remember the chat in that live stream just kind of being with me in that same place of just kind of having the jaw hit the floor when we had a deathcore style ending to a Vocaloid song. It's such a wild feeling to be in that moment, to hear that for your first time, to not know that something like that could exist prior to that moment, and being, well, you have to be there when it's your first time, I'd hope, and just experiencing that. And as soon as that glitch started to come in and the tempo increases, I was like, oh yeah, dude, this is that weird deathcore Vocaloids thing. Yeah. Such a wild track. It makes sense in context of everything else, though. Starting to see the patterns that Utsu-P has in their composition, in their technique, in the way that they craft and mold songs. You start to see how some of these songs work together. I will say, though, that the harsh vocals in the verse and the deathcore outro are... they're new. They're fresh. I kind of hope we hear more of it. This is, I think, in a really weird way, the heaviest song on the album so far. I say it's weird because compositionally, if a deathcore band played this, it would be ridiculously heavy, but they didn't. And it is more pop produced, and part of me knows, hey, dude, this is heavy composition, but the way that it's delivered to my ears doesn't feel that harsher than any of the previous tracks. And it creates this interesting divide in my mind where this is really heavy, but it also kind of isn't. I think that's interesting right there. How you can make music like this that's kind of built on tropes, and the tropes can carry weight. They can increase the impact of something without actually having the sonic impact in the music. Which I guess is kind of something I want to bring up here. As we continue to get through these tracks, I've acclimated. I don't know if I don't think I brought this up after the first song, but I didn't really like the production overall on the track. Really great space between all the instrumentation. The instruments themselves generally sound good, but overall it's a very compressed sound. It's not as expansive as I would like. The instruments are a bit quieter than I would like. And it just took me a moment to adapt to it. And I think at this point in the album, I'm on board with the sound. But right there at the end, it's one of those moments when I'm just thinking to myself, if this had the low end that deathcore likes to use with their, the extra EQ and the extra reverb and the extra bassiness on already, dropped 7 or 8 string guitars, really getting that depth from the instrument and then expanding upon it and making the bass kick really big too. Deathcore does a really great job at creating weight and low end density to their music. And to me, it's a big part of the deathcore breakdown. I think this is a really good showcasing of where the production kind of makes the music. Really, what's being played here at the end isn't too different from a typical deathcore breakdown. It just doesn't have that impact, which is probably for the best looking at what this album is trying to do, as I've already talked about, it takes metal as a texture, shaving off and rounding off the rough edges in order to create something that is safer and more palatable. Part of that is showcased here, removing the weight of a deathcore breakdown to create something that captures the composition to a T, but puts it in a sound that just doesn't convey the weight. It's not a crushing ending. It still kind of feels fun. That's just not usually what this sound goes for. And this is part of me, slowly adapting to the style here, is because this is even more rounded off than even I like to listen to. I've talked about this in the past. I like a good fair bit of pop with my metal. I'm not a metalhead. But even this feels almost a bit too poppy at times. I'm still really enjoying myself. Don't get me wrong. I'm having a blast with this album so far, and I may end up looking into more of Utsu-P after this, assuming the rest of the album treats me well. But there's parts like this ending where I'm like, dude, this could have had a little more impact to it. It's almost as if it became too soft, too safe. But I think it's one of those cases where maybe I'm not the target audience. Although, usually I say that when I listen to technical death metal or black metal or something. But I think in this case, I am close to the mark of the audience, but still just a hair bit outside. It's not where I'm like, in the next town over, like completely have me, listening to something that I have no real interest in. I do enjoy this a lot, but I do think that it is designed to cast a little wider net than, no, that's not it's a good metaphor here. I guess we can just go back to, it's too safe. Tries to grab an audience that is even less metal oriented than me. Yeah, there we go. That's a good way of describing that. And yeah, I don't know if I'd call it disappointment, but it doesn't always feel great. Something else I really like so far is rhythmic shifts. Not necessarily within songs. I feel like each song, being as short as it is typically hyper-focused on its idea. Usually the verse, the pre-chorus, the post-chorus all share similar ideas of atmosphere, instrumentation, usually also riffage and drum patterns. The chorus is the big shift. This is where we tend to get a drastic change from the other part of the song. This is pretty much all the track right here. All three of these songs we've had a bridge in them, but it's usually so similar to everything else that compositionally I could probably put it into one of the other categories, usually the verse category, so that the chorus can still feel like a highlight, a big point, a peak of the track, an isolated section. But the drum work across the tracks is interesting. On track 1, we had a lot of breakbeat stuff, very electronic focus in the rhythmic delivery. Track 2's was very punky though. This is definitely stuff you would have seen in pop punk or even post-hardcore. A lot of syncopation of the snare drum syncopation of the bass kick around the snare drum with a rapid fire intensity. We're looking at uses of 16th and 8th notes to create the syncopation around like a 2 and 4 backbeat on the snare. And this creates something that's very driving, very bouncy, very punky. In this track though, while we did have what I would say is probably a bit more metal-driven drum work, we also had very theatric drums in multiple sections of this track to really drive home a largeness of scope. We saw this in the intro, we see it in the verses, and it's not focused so much on rhythm, but on atmosphere. Lots of reverb on these drums, bringing in the toms to get some nice low end, creates this big epic feels like dum dum, then all this space, dum dum, And it's just like, yes, it feels great. It feels epic. It feels theatric. So we've had 3 songs with 3 different drum approaches to them. While the drum timbre more or less is the same, we are seeing a variety of rhythmic devices within, and I like that. It keeps things fresh. And, you know, even looking at atmosphere, I think that this one does things a little bit different than the other two, with the big theatric opening and the verse being more spacious. Having instruments that play less, creating more pockets for the vocals to be expressed, but also to create a feeling of weight, of anticipation throughout the song, which the other 2 tracks have been just forward momentum, constant. This one creates this, I don't know, it's not necessarily levitating, but it is suspension of time, maybe. Really focusing on a gravitas of atmosphere until we get to the chorus, which is, once again, driving momentum. But the verses are very big. And then we end on heavy use of space as well. That's a cornerstone of, deathcore style breakdowns. You make some big noise, you allow it to reverberate, have some space, make some big noise again. So it's actually interesting how the more theatric opening actually lines up as far as like the blueprint goes of how you're crafting your sound with their deathcore outro. That's kind of neat. Also, compressed vocals. Harsh Vocaloid stuff. That's still blows my mind. I have nothing else to add to it. What? I'm kind of a little lost on this one. I get the majority of it. Let's go over that first. It talks about people freezing up, not showing any emotion. It says people are getting distrustful, and it seems like in their hearts they're just becoming empty and petrified. Says that people have frozen faces, frozen behavior, that the words they choose are frozen responses. They have frozen futures and frozen actions, as if they're just stone with no will of their own, just a doll made of synthetic proteins. Talking about how people are becoming distant from one another and shielding their hearts to other humans. Kind of breaking down the sort of social trust that we could have in one another, and living isolated lives by putting up stone walls between people. Says, what are you really thinking? Your expression changes to plaster. Are you angry, crying, laughing, suffering? Your face just grows paler. You give off faint signals, and I grasp at the slight differences, but there's no body heat, no vital signs anywhere. I'm searching for your warmth. Says it's difficult to emotionally connect with people these days. Talks about people conforming excessively, that they maintain proper distances and decide not to rock any boats, that facial expressions can freeze entirely. There's a little bit of retread here in different vocabulary. But the idea is that people are hardening themselves against other people, removing connection and removing connection between each other. The end of the song says, evolve and dissolve the stone, break free from the evil eye. All of this makes sense. We have really taken the idea of people hardening themselves, becoming emotionally detached from others, and taking that metaphor and saying, well, what if they were hardened by a Medusa? By a not by a Medusa, by a Gorgon. Medusa is a Gorgon, but she's not, whatever. And he says, you need to evolve, break the stone down, connect with people. That's what life's all about. It says, break free from the evil eye. And of course, as you know, Gorgons have snake for hair. And if you look at the snakes, or if you look at the Gorgon's eyes, either one, you got to look at some eyes and then you'll freeze. They will turn you to stone. All of this works well. And then there's one specific line in all of this, in the chorus. Before saying that everybody's frozen up, it says, I'm like a Gorgon. Everybody's frozen up. No one shows any emotion. I'm like a Gorgon. Everyone has gotten so distrustful. Now, I'm thinking, okay, this is a little odd, but maybe it's unintentional. Maybe that's the purpose here. They feel that people harden up around them. They feel like they're a Gorgon. Maybe that's the idea. But then the end of the song says, I'm like a Gorgon. I'm about to go beast mode. Defeat me and show me your real face. And I don't know about this anymore. I kind of just want to dismiss it because the other 99% of the song works beautifully. It's kind of a weird point here. Anyways, we'll just continue on from this. I don't really see too much about how these two work together emotionally or thematically, unlike the last two songs, which are very driving and momentous with songs about always pushing forward. I don't know about this one. It doesn't really feel theatric. The big breakdown at the end, I guess, kind of works. This is the evolve, dissolve the stone section. It feels like an aggressive command to break free. I can kind of see that. Everything else in the song, though, I don't necessarily think there's a synergy there. If you see one, sure, let me know. Put it down into the comments section. But for me, this is a track where maybe the music and lyrics were written separately and then just smashed together for an end product here. All right. From here, unless things drastically change, I'm probably going to start grouping these into two songs before we hit an analysis, given how similar a lot of the composition tends to be. So this next track is called, I don't know, KUCHISAKE? KUCHISAKE, maybe? I don't know. Let's just dive into it, see what's going on. The backup vocals, the choir, that's a really nice addition. We have a syncopated dissonance off on the side. Ooh. Dude, this almost has like a new metal vibe to it. What a shift. Very, Bring Me the Horizon, especially with the violin. Oh, I like that acoustic instrument still sitting at the bottom. Is that a shamisen? Okay, we've had some hip-hop influence in a couple of the tracks. This is the most obvious though. What? That's haunting. The bells are not helping, but the chord progression is definitely quite tense. The rising syncopated pitch. No. What do I say about that? What can I say about that? It's music. It's good music. I think that might be my favorite track off the album so far. Gorgon did have that title originally. Gorgon was the song so far prior to this one that had the most hip hop influence to it, primarily in its more spacious, verses with more vocal rhythmic elements to it. This just went straight into the hip hop territory, and I love the clashing of atmospheres here, particularly, I think, just to bring that into a microcosm at the end of the song and present, 2 bars of this light hip hop sound, very spacious, light instrumentation, and then to contrast that with 2 bars of death metal and screaming, and to just jump back and forth between the extremes so many times. What can you say about a song like this? It is of 2 worlds, that is for sure. And I'd like the lyrics to explore something in that direction. There's also the chorus, which I think this is the most unstable that we've seen the harmony on any of these songs. There's a lot of tension in here. It isn't about tension building, which we see on all 5 of these tracks. The first 30 or 40 seconds is always a type of tension building, but it isn't usually by harmony. It's sonic tension building of filling space, rising in volume, rising in pitch. It's a way of building intensity for a drop or an explosion or something like that, a big impactful moment. But here we actually have unstable, tense chords. This feels unsettling, it feels creepy, it feels haunting. The vocal melody plays into that very well. That paired with the chord progression certainly makes this moment stand out. But then on top of all of that, we have some sort of bell going off in the middle of the track, a glockenspiel or something within that family of instrumentation. And that instrument, in the right context, is always going to amplify creepiness. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's a pop culture thing, nothing innate with a bright metallic sound, but it works. If you got a creepy sound, put some glockenspiel in there, maybe throw a xylophone in there if you want something a little more wood into it. It's going to make it sound creepier. It's exactly what we got here. And what else can I say about this track? It's certainly a first for the album in those 2 regards, but also on the other side of the equation is it excelling at everything we've talked about already. Vocal variety, glitch, general production techniques, the metal side sounding completely solid, alternating more spacious, lower energy sections with punchy, energetic choruses. Now, granted, this is not the most energetic chorus we've had, but compared to the verse, it has quite a bit more drive and momentum than any of the others. It still follows the formula, even if it's not doing the exact same thing that the other songs have done. This certainly stands out to me, though. And we're coming up on halfway through this album. Yeah, like I said, it might be my favorite of the album so far. Now, track 4, I don't have a lot to say about, but I did find it to be very comfortable for me. It sounds like modern Bring Me the Horizon, complete with the highly theatric post-hardcore foundation. Well, let me reword. The post-hardcore foundation taken into a very palatable theatric direction. We saw this with the choir. We saw this with the violin during the smaller part of the song. We saw this with the general reverb and spaciness of it all. It feels large and epic while still at its core being post-hardcore music. It sort of abandons a lot of the textural elements of post-hardcore while retaining the compositional ones. If you listen to the guitar riffs, they sound like they should fit. They're just not the focus of the music anymore. The focus is on the production. It's on the reverb. It's on the strings, these big string stingers. It's on the choir that elevates everything. It's everything that makes it feel larger than life. And this is something that Bring Me the Horizon has certainly popularized, and many bands have, I want to say copied, but have certainly been influenced by. And I think this is the song that stands out to me the most in that, particularly because between the synth and the violin, there are sections of this that I don't think are the exact chord progression of, but feel very inspired, very close to sections of their ever popular Can You Feel My Heart track. That's about all I have to say about that one. I think it's even more theatric than the verse of Gorgon is, especially the intro of Gorgon. That's, I think, is the most theatric part of that track. And this one just seems to elevate all of that and reside within this over-the-top, very dramatic version of rock music. And then from there we went into hip-hop metal, which is just... that's a wild swing. Let's look at some lyrics. So KUCHISAKE is related to a Japanese folklore of the KUCHISAKE Onna, who was an incredibly tall, usually 8 to 9 feet tall woman who wore a mask. White hand, straight black hair, pale skin, a scar, and she wears a mask, and she'll find a victim and say, "Do you think I'm beautiful?" If you say no, she'll murder you on the spot. If you say yes, she'll remove the mask to show a slit in her face that makes a smile from ear to ear. And she will ask again, "Do you still find her pretty?" If you say no, once again, she will kill you. If you say yes, she will put the same slit on your face. Nightmare fuel as far as folklore goes. So from that perspective, I've been trying to figure out what this song is related to that. We have somebody who self-describes as wearing a mask. They say, "When I try to remove it, my mind is hit by flashbacks, countless answers brimming with every kind of insult and verbal abuse." So anytime that they have been emotionally vulnerable with people, they have been shot down. And it's always ended in tragedy for them. They say that their self-affirmation and sense of achievement have fallen to zero. And yet they still want to show this part to others. They say they still want to be loved, even if you were to slit my mouth. Which makes me think that this is a person that isn't necessarily talking, or that this song isn't necessarily talking about the KUCHISAKE, but is simply evoking the imagery of it. That I would even accept pain to have companionship, to have that connection with someone else. It continues on, says, "I'll never say it though. Before those words leave my lips, you better tear my body to shreds altogether. The two of us could have easily laid our hearts bare and shown the deepest parts of ourselves, but we didn't. So we could have connected, and you chose destruction instead. All I wanted was connection." And says, "As much as I want to connect with people, I've been burned in the past, so I won't." Says, "I'll never say those words. I'll never remove my mask because of that." That's pretty much the entire song. There is that one part in the middle of the track that goes hardcore death metal. This part, she says in English, "Am I pretty? My smile is wide and I try to hide, but deep down inside, I wish I would try." And once again, it's a feeling of isolation, of wanting more, but not having the guts to actually put yourself out there because of what's happened in the past. It says it hurts trying to keep it bottled inside. It hurts having it known and laid out. There's pain with keeping it to myself. There's pain with trying to connect with others. It says it would have been easier if I simply stayed a monster. So yeah, that one's kind of a heavy track. The other songs so far have been, hey, why can't life be better? Why can't we connect with people? And this one's like, my self-esteem is it's bottomed out. I have no trust in myself. I want to connect with people, but I don't feel like I'm good enough for the world. Label me a monster. It makes life easier. It's like, geez, that got dark really quick. All right, track 5 translates to Giant Hornet. And it is a song about being poisonous or maybe even toxic and feeling that there's no way for you to be more than what you are. It's another story that I think kind of fits along with the last one, being more I'm a monster and undeserving of love kind of thing that we sort of explored in KUCHISAKE. The song kicks off with I'm a giant Japanese hornet, buzz, my wings never stop. For me, no honey ever drips, yet it keeps coming unchanged. I've been here forever, a bug that never turns, a black insect that seems ready to explode. So comparing them to a bee, bees are kind of loved in some ways. They create honey, which people like to eat. Bees are necessary for the what is that word? For the environment. There's positives to bees. Wasps and hornets, not so much. They're just kind of bullies. They'll sting you and then just go do their thing. Says that I don't produce honey. My wings don't stop. This is what I am. The pre-chorus says, my poison-filled stinger feels forgotten, spilling over, clinging to the overflowing honey, which is interesting. The people around me say there's no real compassion and no real value. The chorus kicks in, says there's just poison, a lingering sting, a constant sting. No matter how you stand, it's unbearably painful, so beware. No matter the setting, the environment changes, but I'm still a menace. And then there's a cool little onomatopoeia that goes on that says, I go bzz, 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 you go bzz, 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 left-handed, bzz, 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 high-pitched, bzz, bzz, bzz. But interestingly, it seems that the Japanese language doesn't use buzz for a buzzing sound. They use bun, 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 bun. That's always something I find really interesting, is how onomatopoeias might differ between cultures and languages. Once again, though, much like many of the past tracks, as we progress through the song, it's more about honing in on specific ideas and finding different ways to say them rather than saying new things altogether. For instance, later on during the bridge, it says there's no honey, but the dark southern uniform and the poisonous lullaby of the night song. Corners are sharp, and the shape hides something, but there's a deep cut at the corner, a song that pierces with a needle. Once again, bringing up the ideas of danger, of sharpness, of poison, no honey. A lot of these ideas coming back to the general concept that the vocalist feels that they are unfit for society. Interesting song then. I think it's not quite as upbeat, and it does bring more negativity and dissonance to the track than some of the others. But it wasn't necessarily a song, sort of same thing with track 4, that I felt was negative in any way. It's interesting to hear how they kind of take these themes and lightly pair them to the music, lyrical themes, and pair them to the music rather than going full on in on that direction of them. All right. Mysophobia. This one features 2 vocalists, Miyamai Mocha and Havoc. Let's dive into it. So much drum work on this track. A massive low-end tone to this. Ooh, flow shift there. All right, this is going to be a bit on the quicker side. Just a couple of things I want to bring up real quick. First of all, I'm going to wager that the male vocals there were the Havoc Vocaloid. Oh, Havoc's new. Developed by a different company than the others. Only speaks one language, English, which is interesting. Hatsune Miku speaks 3 languages, and the Kagamine Vocaloids speak 2 each. I didn't look at the Vocaloid who did track 4. Hatsune Miku is on track 5. But yeah, Havoc is an English Vocaloid. Interesting. Anyways, there's something about it just doesn't quite click for me. I think it's the first male Vocaloid I've ever heard. And I'm hoping that that doesn't have anything to do with it, but it might. But specifically there at the end, I thought the voice worked generally fine throughout, but in those last like 6 words or whatever, it felt strange. It didn't feel... Okay, here's the thing. This is going to be weird. Vocaloids, as I mentioned at the beginning of this album, I kind of have a difficulty discerning if they're real vocals or Vocaloid, that the technology has come pretty far. This right here feels Vocaloid. It feels digital. It feels fake. There's elements to it. Now, one thing though is that I'm listening to these vocals with very minimal sound around them. I'm really getting to listen to the nitty-gritty, the nuance of the voices. And maybe it's there that when by themselves, it's easy to discern that it's a Vocaloid, that it has some telltale sonic signs to it. That when it's surrounded by music, when there's so much other stuff going on, that it's more difficult to find these areas where you can say, oh, okay, so that's not a real vocalist. It has this quality to it. It sounds digital in this, part of the sounds. But there at the end, the illusion broke. So far on the album, been kind of 50-50. Some parts, I'm like, I don't know. And other parts, I'm like, okay, that's definitely a Vocaloid there. But for the most part, I've just rolled with it. Hasn't really been a point where my suspension of disbelief has broken. And here it did. Something about those final few words just, they didn't work. Felt off. In a strange way, because like Vocaloids, like I said, they kind of have the sound, right? Especially the feminine Vocaloids. There's just something specific about the ways that they sound that's kind of like, oh, very Vocaloid-ish. Even human vocalists like Otto, who have replicated the Vocaloid sound, can get to a point where they're replicating specific nuances of Vocaloid software that allows them to sound more Vocaloid-like, less human. So there are qualities there that can help differentiate the two. And this one just leans really hard in that direction. Whereas the other Vocaloids that we've listened to on this album, they've been fine. They haven't really caused me to take a step back and be like, oh yeah, this isn't, a real vocalist. This was just, I suppose the word right here is distracting. It's a distracting moment for me. Now, on the other hand, though, I had mentioned, I think it was track 4, I had called it a nu metal song, and I retracted that. When I talked about it later, I made sure to call it post-hardcore because I really think that's what it is, a more palatable version of post-hardcore, but still that's what sits at the base of that song. This is straight up nu metal, though. And I like that it jumps back and forth between the two vocalists. I think that's a very cool thing to do on this. I'm a big fan of dual vocals, especially when the vocalists are so distinct. I mean, we had the two Kagamine vocalists on track 1, and honestly, I couldn't tell the difference. So having the timbres of the two being so similar doesn't really give me what I enjoy out of multiple vocalists, which is that timbre shifting. It's having the variety of timbres in that same role of being lead vocals, and we got that here. I thought that was cool, and it works rather well. The back and forth, going from lighter to darker, more aggressive, going from sung to more texture and rhythmic stuff, kind of focusing away from pitch and moving just towards the textural side of it. It works really well. There's been plenty of bands who have done this in the past, not like this is brand new, but I do think that it provided a nice bit of contrast in not only this song, but also the album. Just kind of diving into this new vocal element with all the other musical components sort of being still in that metallic area, having the vocal shift and the timbre shifting on this track helped break things up. Although it's not the only thing, the drums on this song were ridiculous. I think that stood out to me the most, that the drum work on this one was quite a bit of a step up from other tracks. But other than that, we also have, build-ups, we have drops, we have sections that cut everything out entirely. There's definitely the patterns continuing on through this halfway point of the album. Let me hit some lyrics and then we'll push forward into EMBLEM. I don't know, dude. This is a diss track. It's called Mysophobia, which is germophobia is another word for it. It's a fear of germs. I believe that's supposed to be used as a derogatory way of referring to somebody else as a germ, something that's infecting something pure, because these lyrics are about people who fake fame. It's a really interesting topic for this album. It says, you cut the corners and call it grace. I see the lie behind your face. You fake the grind, you fake the flame, and still expect to earn the name. You wear the crown but dodge the blame. I walk through fire to earn the same. It says, you cut all the corners, you take all the shortcuts, and you expect to have the same respect on your name as I do on mine. I went through all of these trials. You didn't. The chorus says it's a vast idle machine. It's absurd and nonsensical. You can't just twist together a bunch of different parts and put them together believing that that's perfection, is basically what it translates to. That you're taking a bunch of piecemeal things together, smashing them together and calling it perfect. rather than just being authentic. I think that's really interesting for an album that so far, I mean, maybe this is authentic to Utsu-P. I am definitely not calling the artist out here, but this album is a smorgasbord of a lot of different metal sounds all smashed together using Vocaloids, not even real vocalists on the album. The idea of calling something fake and smashing things together for perfection, again, looking at the very perfect production on this album, this is a song that I think would work well for a hip-hop artist with a raw vocal style. Maybe they're up and coming. I think this would work well for an indie rock band, as far or like an unsigned post-hardcore band or something like that. I could see this type of lyrical theme working within that idea of being authentic and true to yourself, and going in and being this raw, real person making real art. And again, I'm not saying that Utsu-P isn't a real person. I'm not saying that they haven't had trials and tribulations. I'm not saying that they're not real artists, but it's really interesting to have these lyrics behind digital instrumentation and Vocaloids with perfect production. It just seems to me to be a bit of a sonic mismatch to the themes, not necessarily a lore-based. Lore is a weird word for it, but like what are they called? Industry plants, right? If they're singing about having tough upbringings, but they're nepo babies or something like that, like that's more of a personal schism in the themes. This is just more of a sonic one. Nothing against Utsu-P. It's just that the delivery, how this message is being delivered to me, feels at odds with the message itself. That's all I'm saying here. The rest of the song continues as usual to just find different ways to say this. Dirt in the name, gold in your shame, still I remain pure in the flame. Later on it says, you chase lights and I burn bars, you hide your hands and I show my scars. Just more of this, you take the shortcuts, you're a perfect person, you haven't had the trials and tribulations I have. I am that real person, and I show it. I don't try to hide the raw sides of me. It's a diss track against no one, sung by no one. It kind of baffles my mind. But I think from the sheer perspective of, hey, let me just write a diss track, I think it works well. The music works. I like the more hip-hop oriented idea here, both musically and vocally. The back and forth on the vocals is nice too. And it captures that aggression of trying to call someone out for encroaching on your turf while they're doing it, unfairly. They haven't really lived the life kind of idea. I think it all generally works. It's just a very bizarre case where a non-person is dissing no one in particular. And it just, to say that sentence out loud, this is 2025, y'all. Let's dive into the next track here. It's called Emblem. I like the darker timbre of this vocalist. With this moodier atmosphere, it works really well. A little bit of a Phrygian mode on our guitar over there. Plays really nicely against the more metal framing of the rest of the chords.
好み及び光本当にあるのかしら四角三角ベルの立ち回るか別かはしら定められにからるフューエル期待込めて星5我々ブラム食べるだけの神のことにそこ投げてもありがとうありがたがるからまた皆群がるから再びありがたがる気づけばなのかもなのか知らぬまんま
One of the most jarring songs, I think. Harmonically, it's all over the place, but these sections are so different from one another. Yeah, very cool halftime ending here. Ooh. The pop. Oh. Okay, maybe Emblem wasn't the most chaotic track on the album. Those synths on the outside? This is interesting because it's a pop rock song compositionally paired with incredibly distorted guitars. The constant clashing between the weightless synths and the ridiculously weighty drums and guitars. What was that 80s electronic drum kit drum fill? All right. This is the most diverse track we've listened to yet. It's also the most electronic. It's the brightest. It's the bubbliest. It's the most positive. It also has, in my books, the most annoying Vocaloid. It has that super cutesy, sounds like a kid is singing it sound, and I'm not a big fan of that. But it does provide a really interesting clashing. It mixed with the synths brings this very bubblegum, bright, bubbly pop sound. Just very cutesy, very positive, very uplifting, and that's sung and played alongside this massive, gritty guitar and bass and drums, and they're all metal, and it's like, wow, that's a very big schism between the uplifting and poppy and bright and the gritty and dark and heavy. And there's nothing in the middle to help balance it. It is just, you just have to deal with that massive gap there in atmosphere. But aside from that, we also have the back and forth between the more metallic sections and the pop rock sections and the glitchy electronic stuff. This is the most electronic song on the album so far. And although it just dawned on me, how much of this is real instruments? I keep talking about the drums, bass, and guitar as something different than the synths, but are they? Are these just digital electric guitars and drums and bass? Is all of this just samples in a machine? I don't know. I gotta go look up how Utsu-P creates a song. I suppose that's the next thing on my list here of educating myself about Vocaloid music. But I suppose all of this is technically digital electronic music. However, it borrows heavily, regardless of how the instruments come out to be, borrows heavily from metal and rock in its composition and sound. But this one doesn't. There's still that part of it, but there's so much that's here from electronic music. There's glitch, let's put 50 different sound effects in the span of 10 seconds. There's all sorts of textures and stuff, not to support the gritty weightiness, but to be part of the storytelling in and of itself. That's the part of electronic music that we really haven't seen represented too much on this album so far. I find it interesting that we're getting it here, but not in total isolation. It's still a song that wants to be heavy and weighty at times. There's also that bizarre choice of playing pop rock composition on electric gritty metal guitars. That sounds very bizarre to my ears. Like a dog mooing. Just how? Not something that should happen. So this is probably my least favorite track on the album, but I think it's a good track, especially in its placement. Maybe even bringing it in a little earlier would have been fine too. We've been dealing with a lot of metal stuff, particularly, I mean, we kicked it off with metal too, but we explored some rockier and punkier ideas at the beginning of the album, but we've really had a nice chunk of metal, particularly deathcore continues to pop. We had like 2 or 3 songs with deathcore breakdowns in it. Or something adjacent to that sort of composition and overbearing, weighty sound. And so to kind of pull us out of that, we're exploring something a bit brighter, more electronic, poppier, getting away from the metal as a core sound to pursue and more as a texture to add to a composition. And like I said, I think it's a nice diversion. It's not necessarily a song that I liked, but the contrast is much appreciated here. And I kind of hope that we keep going in this direction. Just if nothing else, to lighten things up a little bit before, well, I was going to say before the peak. We have 4 tracks left on this album. There is a bonus song, which I have been asked to check out. I don't typically listen to bonus songs, but I was told that the album feels incomplete without it as far as theming goes. So I'm going to see how I feel about track 12, and if it doesn't feel right, we may check out the bonus track. It's only 3 minutes long. But the thing, it's an older track too. It came off of a 2021 album, and this is simply a remastering of it. So it's not even technically part of this album's composition process. So I'm just gonna say right here, I'm pretty against it at the moment. We'll see how I feel when we wrap the album up, if I think it's worth diving into a bonus song. But based on context alone, I don't think we're gonna check it out. Regardless though, we only have 4 songs left. It's a whole 12 minutes, maybe tops, of music. How peaks, album peaks. How do we get there? What are they for? Usually an album peak will be in the final third of an album. Usually find it in the penultimate or final song. But my question here really is, how do you peak from this? Much like most metal albums, they kind of run at a 10 all the time. You dip away from that 10 occasionally, but it's not like there's much room above what this album's already doing for the song to really peak here at the end. It's going to have to be an emotional peak, I think, really focusing on like emotional atmospheric layers, which doesn't really seem to be the core idea behind the album. But as far as energy goes, as far as layering, production, directionality, electricity, I mean, the album's just been a constant 10 the entire time. It can't peak because it's running at max constantly. It's been peaking since beat 1. So I'm kind of curious to see how this album wraps up. I was saying that I thought this was a nice track, and I wanted to see this feeling stick around for a little bit before we hit a peak. But honestly, like, how do you elevate this album any more than it already has? Now, we also have track 7. This one was interesting. EMBLEM. It brings back some of the hip-hop ideas we saw in Mysophobia. We have a focus on rapped vocals. Once again, the entire second verse, if it was done by a human person, would have blown me away. It was incredibly precise and fast, and the technique was solid. And there's kind of a part of that. Well, let me bring this up real quick. It's tough for me to be impressed by this album. As Utsu-P is a producer and composer, I can be impressed by the ways that he composes music, much like I would be impressed by a classical composer. They typically didn't play every single instrument in their symphonies, but they still came up with the ideas. There's still a reason to enjoy and praise their output. But assuming that all the instruments are digital, assuming that the vocals are digital, it's kind of tough to enjoy the performative side of this. And there was actually, during that second verse of track 8, when the vocals went super quick and precise, I really thought to myself, I'd love to hear a cover of this. I think Vocaloids introduce a really interesting element into the mix. Not just in criticism, but I think just in the way I listen to music. So much of the music I listen to, and by so much, I mean like honestly 90% of the music I listen to is musicianship-based music. I don't really listen to a lot of electronic music. I think it's cool. It can certainly create a specific atmosphere and jam that I can enjoy. But I have a really tough time clicking with it. I think there's a part of my brain that knows no one's playing these instruments. And it's why if I can find a live cover of an electronic song, even if I don't think it hits the same emotional peaks that the original did, I may actually enjoy it more because there is a musicianship to the process now. And I think a lot of this just has to do with how I was raised in music. This might be a sort of bias that I'm able to overcome as I listen to more music like this. And it's not to say that I'm completely divorced or separated from electronic music. There are a couple of electronic artists that I really enjoy, but they're the ones who push the boundaries, who use the limitlessness of electronic music to explore music that can't be played in more traditional ways. And to me, there's a lot of expression in that, a sort of breaking through the limitations of physical music playing. Whereas something like this that could be done with instruments, assuming this isn't, feels... I feel disconnected from it, because this could have been done with instruments. These could have been real vocalists. And I feel a little... It just reduces my experience with it a little bit. And it's not something I always think about, but it is something I thought about there in track 8. Because for a second I was like, dude, these vocals are ridiculous. And then I remembered they're just programmed. There's no performative side to it. And that did deflate me a little bit. And I kind of hate to say that, because I try not to, as often as I can, I try not to let my biases affect my listening experience too much. There's always going to be places where they do bleed in. I can't control that. I'm human. But I think I've done a pretty good job over the years of trying to be as objectively subjective as I can when I talk about music. To talk about things that I liked or didn't like without allowing it to alter too much of my appreciation of the music. And I think that's one thing I've done a really good job of in the past, is appreciating music even if I didn't like it. And here I do feel my appreciation waning because of the way the music was made. Again, that's certainly a me issue. That's not a problem with electronic music or anything like that. I don't think electronic music or digitally created music is any less capable of being emotionally engaging than traditional means of creating music. But for me personally, I do have that bit of disconnect because it's all digitally created. Which is interesting, because this kind of loops back to like an hour ago when I was talking about people who get really fixated on drum velocities. Like something really small that technically really shouldn't mess with your impression of the music at all, and it absolutely alters your perception of it. So yeah, there's that whole discussion. Regardless, track 7 though has a very cool Phrygian thing going on, bringing in a slight spice of more Middle Eastern vibes into this still metal sound, while focusing on riding the waves of the highs and the lows, using the highs to implement these crushing metallic sections, and the lows to look at these more spacious, not lo-fi, but less involved moments, really allowing just a basic atmosphere, texture, and drum beat. And for the vocals to sit above that, which actually fits the hip-hop vibe there really well. Much like track 8, track 7 just bouncing between a lot of different vibes. We have hip-hop, we have rock, we have metal, we have more breakdowns in there too. And nothing seems to flow together really well at all. I think there was like 10 seconds of something bright and poppy, and then out of nowhere that shifted to a totally different riff of like, super gnarly, heavy stuff. And then, I don't know, like 10 seconds later, we're into this atmospheric hip-hop rhythm stuff. And we do that for 30 seconds because it's our verse. And then we're into like some metal buildup and then a poppy metal. It's all over the place. Nothing's connected. As wild as this album has been, I really think that tracks 7 and 8 here are the most disconnected songs. This hasn't really been an issue. I haven't brought it up at all, this album. It's certainly been a part of the experience, shifting between different styles, but it's never really been at the forefront of the composition before. And it's not something I'm a big fan of, especially not at the frequency that these two songs did. But who knows, maybe the lyrics will lean into that crazy jumping around between ideas, and sort of a flurry or frantic lyrical theming or something like that. Speaking of, let's dive into some lyrics. I don't know why I'm speaking like this. Weird cadence, that's for sure. I wish I knew what EMBLEM was about. There is a lot of focus on emblems. It shows up in like every fourth line, the word emblem. We have a repetition of a slave to the sellable emblem that is repeated 4 times somewhere in this song. We have the phrase, I love, you love, we love the logo. We just need an emblem. It seems to be a whole song focusing on the idea that so much is supposed to be encapsulated into a single image, an icon, a logo, an emblem, something to represent something else. And we have the protagonist, the vocalist, not understanding this or viewing it as a bad thing and being so outside of the general discourse of everyone loving logos and emblems. It's such a bizarre sentence to say. That they can't quite grasp what all of this is about. Now, I think we can extrapolate this one layer and say that this might be about brand loyalty. That might be what the song is about, but I'm not entirely sure that that's exactly what's going on here. So I'm just going to leave that as a hypothesis, that might be the goal of this song. At the beginning, though, we seem to have some interesting statements. It's the trending one. It's amazing, something that's been chosen. If that doesn't suit your taste, how about this one? For enthusiasts, legit, and pros. These all are in quotations as if they're marketing statements delivered to someone. They talk about drowning in all of this, that a label reflects the body and everything depends on the label, but if the machine's song used to be a moth, how does it somehow become a butterfly? I think that's interesting right there. That if the machine itself, what the emblem is representing is just a moth, how do you turn that into a butterfly? Basically, the idea of how do you brand something not beautiful as something beautiful? And I'm just now beginning to think that maybe this has to do with one of the previous songs about this person feeling like they're a monster. It was a KUCHISAKE, where they felt that they were so distant from everyone else in society that no one would love them. And there's, well, what if this song then is about them trying to rebrand themselves and how everyone loves a good rebrand? That's also an interesting take that I'm not entirely 100% behind. It's just where my mind went for a moment. But then we get into this weird section where he starts talking about, says, not understanding likes or dislikes. I'm going along with the number of stars you've given me. This thing about stars later on says, it can't be determined. I'll throw my hopes into the reviewers for 5 stars. At the very end of the song, stating, I'm going to kick away a 1-star review out of spite and scatter it across the beautiful night sky. This idea of reviewing and rating people within the concept of what seems to me hustle culture in a way, rating your Uber drivers and stuff like that. Maybe that's what it is, but again, extrapolating it out to just general reactions to people. When you present yourself to someone, they are going to internally, or maybe externally, if they just feel like praising or berating you, they will let you know what they think about you. So maybe that's what this whole thing is about. Trying to find a way to rebrand yourself to where people will like you better, and doing it in a very bizarre, figurative language, using brands, logos, and rating each other on stars. I don't know. It's kind of bizarre. But at one point it just says we're slave to the sellable emblem. We'll do whatever we're told as long as it's dressed up nicely. And of course, whatever that represents is up for sale. I don't know. I think I get it now, having spoken through it, but it's such a big leap for me from what's stated to what I think the metaphor is talking about that I'm not even really sure that that's where it's going, but there's enough thread. And I'm kind of like, I could pull at the edges and have them connect together through the thread. It's a big jump. That's for sure. Now, I'd really like some help with this one. As far as I can tell from a couple of different quasi-translations, EGUI is not a Japanese word, and it is being used here as more of a rhythmic cadence helper to basically fill in space with some vocal sounds. But it's used all over the place. The beginning of the song, we, the final super level. The more we become EGUI-like, the more ultra EGUI we get. I've got you, a gigantic, colossal EGUI. Godlike, a hype broken thing soaring to the heavens. The feeling of overdrive won't be hidden. Even if I'm EGUI, it's not because I've turned my eye away, so I'm still EGUI. Don't weirdly cling to the usual irritation. Let it become that. Just keep moving through the hard life. I'm aiming for your EGUI style. What does any of this mean? The general gist I get here is to allow yourself to continue to become bigger, to become larger than life, whether that is simply doing more for yourself, doing more for your community, do more, be larger, have an impact is what I get out of this. Now, there is one line, though, in the second verse, and it also shows up in the outro as well. It says, "That's a disaster. That's a super big thing. Is that our rescue? God like a hype broken thing soaring to the heavens." And so it seems that outside of our narrator, other people aren't too convinced that this is a good thing. So I'm not really sure what this is about beyond be big, be impactful. We do have a little bit in the bridge that says, please become happy. Don't do anything, just try to get a description of a kind person and break it down. EGUI style, Supa. EGUI style. I don't know, dude. I think I'd be lost if this was in English and we used more traditional English rhythmic fillers than this. And I still think I don't know. I still don't think I'd understand what was happening here. So we're just going to move on. Just going to pretend I didn't attempt to dissect those lyrics. The next track here is called P-PANDA, although given that it's Utsu-P, it's probably P-PANDA. Let's dive into it. see what's going on with these next two tracks. Ooh, I was not expecting that. Startled me. Ooh, I like that descending. Oh, a little bit of those, a little bit of the snaps going back. Did it. Ooh. The shift to the triplet pulse. Such an infectious rhythm. Yeah, dude, those triplet breaks are nice. Oh, it's a rising section in much the same way we had a descending pattern in the intro. Very fun way to bring it full circle there. The whiplash of those metal beats. Very fun auxiliary percussion part here. I love that pitch percussion stuff in the background. The very sharp pitch shifting going on back there. Track 9 wasn't even 3 minutes long, and honestly, I think was one of the, I don't want to say it's the least interesting or one of the lesser interesting tracks, but given everything we've listened to at this point, it definitely fits within the mold really well. We do have some really fuzzy tones that are applied underneath some rapping, and there is a general emptiness through a lot of this. It's that like metallic hip hop sound that we've heard a couple of times now. There are, though, why can't I think of it? It's the cool rhythm stuff, the snaps. The Scottish snaps. There we go. No, not Scottish, Scotch snaps. The da-da, 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 da-da. I love that. That is such an infectious rhythm, and this song has a ton of them. And it's just a good song all around. Great atmosphere, great energy, and very catchy rhythms. I'm down for it. But it doesn't really stand out, especially after EMBLEM and EGUI being all over the place musically, and even Gacha having a glitched out, heavy, abrasive ending. That stands out. And for an album that's as diverse as this, compositionally, I think sonically the album's pretty consistent. It's the glue that holds all of these disparate ideas together, is that generally speaking, this all fits into the same realm of emotion and atmosphere. But compositionally, these songs are wildly diverse. And this one just doesn't do much with the composition. It just sticks with the general sound that the album's going for. But then we have Gacha. And I kind of felt the same way about this one. I'm getting to a point where, I already called out, even in track 1, drops. I called out big moments where the music dipped, where the music hit hard, where we came in on just the massive tones. It's a song that certainly follows convention in a lot of ways, despite its eclectic sonic palette. But as I move through the album, especially here at the end with only 6 minutes to go, I've certainly found a lot of patterns that Utsu-P uses in their music. And I don't know if that's been weaponized against me or not, but the ending to this, and even the beginning of it, absolutely grabbed my attention. This is a song that kind of surprised me in ways. And I find that to be interesting, that even though the general blueprint is fairly common throughout these tracks, that at the end of the day, the songs can still keep me on my toes, even if it's not from moment to moment anymore, but just in specific points of the music. Otherwise, though, Gacha hits on a lot of the same elements we've been exploring throughout the song, but it does have a ridiculously infectious auxiliary percussion. I don't even know what instrument that is, honestly. It's got a hollow sound, but also a metallic one. It makes me think that it's not necessarily a xylophone, but it's not a glockenspiel either. It's too bright for a marimba. I don't know. Maybe it's totally digital too. That's always a possibility. And maybe the timbre's been altered by filters and such. So there's always that too. Regardless, the instrument itself sounds phenomenal. And the melody it's playing is so catchy and so bouncy, and it's great counterpoint against the main vocals, which I think this is the first time I've brought up the term counterpoint. We really haven't had a lot of it. Ornamental ideas, foundational ideas, and then the vocals. The vocals are the only melodies we really had throughout most of these songs. So yeah, a little bit of counterpoint here. And then the ending, dude, just glitched out breakdown. Wild stuff. Now, I've sort of praised this a little bit throughout this album, but I do want to make it a point here before we move into the final sixth of this album and reach the concluding point of it, is that despite what I have said about Utsu-P's ideas in general, I know I've had a lot of praise for him on this, but I've also had some criticism as well. I think at the end of the day, though, he's a phenomenal producer. One of the things that always stands out to me and what makes me think somebody is just, above the general cut of other people in their field, particularly in the realms of electronic music, is sonic placement. Not necessarily where the instruments are placed. I think that is just a general guidance for a good, the differentiation between an amateur and a good producer is knowing where to place instruments. But I think what Utsu-P really stands out here in this album for me is the placement of tone. Saying, okay, I have this idea, drums, guitar, whatever, on these instruments, these riffs, these chords. What can I add to that? And sometimes totally makes sense. Bringing in strings or a choir with it, yeah, so many, even in the realm of metal, bands have done that. Metal and choirs and violin, they just go together really well. But it's the ideas that are a bit out there that I would never expect, that I've never heard before, but fit so well, like that auxiliary percussion instrument we just listened to on God Gacha. The melody itself is kind of bonkers for what's going on in there, and yet it still fits. The timbre, the sound of the instrument is kind of weird too. It's very bright in a song that hasn't really had a lot of brightness to it. It does stand out quite a bit because of its timbre and because of its pitch a little bit. But it works. And to me, that's my indicator that Utsu-P is elevated amongst his peers. Brings it up a little bit. I'm sure that if you knew more about electronic music, maybe there's techniques, effects, filters, modulations that he's done that you're like, dude, other people would not have been able to do that. I don't have that knowledge set to really key in on that. But what I do know is that every single moment of every single song here has had a cacophony of sounds, so many layers, so many different textures and ideas and flavors and spices and colors to tones with a variety of different ideas, and yet it all feels like it fits. We have had a couple of songs where the transitions are a bit rougher, but generally even within those moments, all of the layers work even if they shouldn't. And that's really where Utsu-P stands out for me. In all of these different ways of combining these sounds into positive, harmonious patterns. Things that, honestly, I don't think another producer would have been able to pull off. And then you just got to add the fact in there, once again, as an electronic producer, that some of these sounds, most of these sounds, are part of an infinite collection of sounds. Unlike metal, which you usually just have to worry about your instrument and how it sounds when you play it, there's a limitless possibility to these textures and ornamental ideas, and the synth tones and all this stuff. And yet, out of all of that infinite vastness, Utsu-P somehow picks the sounds that are unique, something that I haven't always heard within the context of metal, but still fits. And even 11 tracks in is continuing to find new sounds that fit, keeping these songs within a unique color palette than other tracks. They might share the same base colors, but the secondary or tertiary colors for each of these pictures, assuming that each track in my metaphor is a picture, that the secondary and tertiary colors are constantly in flux, finding different ways to create visual identities for each of them, translating that to sonic identities for each of these tracks. It's really impressive. And then again, still making the whole album feel cohesive sonically. Nothing of this really feels out of place other than EGUI. Part of that is that it's the poppiest, most electronic song, but also Zundamon's voice, I think, is definitely a standout in this, and I don't think that through the whole of the album, that Vocaloid necessarily works well with all of the other ones on this album. Let's hit some lyrics for these two. These lyrics are getting so bizarre. This one is about a panda who's loved by all. The beginning says, "The sweet panda was loved by all, with everyone assuming she only had a cute side." The chorus says, "My cheeks are spotless white, my eyes an unwavering black. With a hyper-invincible face, I've got nothing to fear." How attractive! How attractive. But then, the people see the panda pee. And it says that folks couldn't accept that, so they expressed how they felt. And so the panda fires back. "Quit looking at things you don't need to. Not a single mistake is acceptable in this world. It just demands a perfect face." It says all you want is purity and beauty. I have to take this as a metaphor because at face value, it's kind of ridiculous. It must be about people wanting perfection. In general, one small mistake will cost you your livelihood, can cost you a relationship, all sorts of things. And how even something as normal and insignificant as urinating is something that in this world turned people away from this panda. I don't know if it's a great metaphor, but I think I get what it's saying. It's about all I have to say about that one. Another bizarre track lyrically. It begins and ends with the phrase, "Why am I not well liked?" which seems to be a recurring theme throughout most of these tracks, is a main character who is either saying that they're better than everyone else or wishing that they were at least on par with everyone else. It's always a comparison between the character or the person singing and society. This one, though, says, "Even if I start over and do it all again, even if I reset the computer and pull the plug, it will always be out of reach." That whatever their goals are so far beyond who they could ever be. Even knowing everything that's ahead of them, if they could somehow go back in time with the knowledge they had and do it all again, they still wouldn't be able to achieve their dreams. And then jumps to the XD1000th century. Having undergone unprecedented progress, mankind is on the cusp of a catastrophic ending. We create something called Noah's Ark, and it's at capacity, being filled with the top percentages of the world's most intelligent. It says, even when millions of years have passed, I was never able to fulfill meaning into my life, nor able to close the gap. The lucky ones who got to ride on Noah's Ark are being decided by rock, paper, scissors, all at random as God wills it. This is interesting because it brings in a Judeo-Christian perspective to this. We already bring up Noah's Ark, but we also have the idea that God created people at random, that the hand you're dealt at the beginning of life is totally random and will dictate what you'll be able to do. That some things, no matter what, will be out of reach because of your status of when you started, when you were born. It then goes on to talk about how humanity has done so much with their life, making use of flints and then even making flickering screens. Going past the event horizon, we have continued to surpass technology. But then it talks about hyperspace transmission machines. My guess is we're talking about Noah's Ark again, leaving the planet. And it talks about AI creating naked pictures of themselves in order to trade for sexual favors, in order to live on Noah's Ark. I'm not entirely sure how we've skipped from humanity to AI here, and this never comes back up at all. It just kind of threw that in there in the middle of the song. Very strange. We come back to the idea that no matter how much technology we've advanced, that the narrator still could not reach their dreams, even if they had started over with all of this technology. And that these games of rock, paper, scissors are actually under the table dealings and bribes, that you can still cheat the system, but again, based on your status. If you're poor and cheating the system, it's high risk, high reward. If you don't get caught, you'll be fine. But maybe the people you're bribing end up taking your money and throwing you in jail. Whereas if you're rich, you can just bribe people all you want. And then it ends, once again, why am I not well liked? This is a wild trip on this album lyrically. I really thought we were in store for one thing given how the album started, and it's just spiraling out of control as the album continues on. These lyrical themes are becoming a little awkward, and they're all sort of still focusing on this one concept, but going in really bizarre directions with it, which on the one hand, I appreciate. I'm not a big fan of just saying the same thing over and over and over. A lot of pop rock albums like to do this. Pop albums even like to do this. But here we are confronting very similar themes, but finding inventive ways to approach them, even if I don't think that the lyrics are particularly strong in the past few tracks. Actually, it is. EMBLEM, EGUI, P-PANDA, and God Gacha. Anyways, these songs, I think lyrically have not been my favorite. We've had some wildly great music in these four, but lyrics are, God Gacha, though. So for those who don't know, Gacha, here Gacha, is, I'm going to oversimplify this and probably technically be wrong, but I think that the idea will be got across. At least over here in the US, sorry. We used to have these little coin machines. You would put a quarter in and spin the dial, and then some toy and a capsule would fall out, and you'd get the toy. And we just called these toy machines, I think is what we called them. We don't really have too many of them anymore in this, well, at least in my area of the States. But Japan does have them. They call them gacha machines. And again, I don't know if that's technically correct, but it's correct enough for what's going on here. The idea, though, is you pay money and you get a random gift. Maybe it's the rare one. Maybe it's the one you always wanted. Maybe it's not great at all. Not what you wanted and low quality. It's random delivery, randomly being given something. And the idea of having your life being randomly dealt out by a god, where maybe you don't get the best one, maybe you get a terrible one, terrible life handed out from the gacha machine. That's it's actually kind of clever. I like that. Plus you got the double G, you got the alliteration going on there. Yeah, I okay, that's I'm on board with that. All right, 7 minutes of music ahead of us. We have Cold Death in all lowercase. I mean, it doesn't show up there, but it is all lowercase. And then Perfect 10 to wrap the album up. Let's dive in. Really like the percussion back there. Those really tight rolls on whatever instrument that is. Very dark and haunting. We have noise coming in over here. Yeah. The piano was a nice idea. The really quick delivery at the end of the second verse felt a little too choppy though. I don't know if it was the specific syllables. I do feel like that we're returning to a musical theme of empowerment though, finally after so long. I don't expect it to stay like this, but it's different. The water drop sounds. Acoustic guitar. The gallops. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Strong bit of tension there and instability. A little bit of unresolved chordal ideas that can point towards an unresolved or unfinished story. I like this. Both of these. Like I had mentioned, for a few tracks, we've been spiraling. The lyrics are getting darker. The songs themselves are getting more intense, more varied, more layered, more chaotic. And we kind of backed that off a little bit and explored two tracks that are a bit more in the traditional metal style here, focusing on a simplicity of direction. Drums, guitar chords, and the bass help support it. Big sounds there. Definitely got to get that big metal sound. And then the vocals on top. There's very little extra instrumentation supporting textures or colors. There's no weird breakaways into let's do pop and then death metal and then punk rock or whatever. Like it's very, this is what we're doing. Let's stick with it. It's focused, it's unvaried, and it's lacking the chaotic electronic elements that we've been exploring more and more on the album. in a lot of ways, it brings us back to the beginning of the album. Musically, where we are revisiting the simpler times of tracks 1 and 2 that incorporated some electronic components without allowing it to dominate. We really saw around the middle of the track as that flipped over and the metal became subservient to the glitchy electronic stuff. And the hyper variety that electronic music affords became the focus of the songs that sometimes incorporated the heaviness of metal rather than creating metal songs that sometimes allow for the variety that is afforded through electronic music. It is a very cool way to bring this back through. And I like how Cold Death was a little bit of a balanced form, whereas Perfect 10 is 100% a straightforward kind of rocky metal track. There's plenty of parts in here that I think would work just fine in a rock context, but those big guitars are definitely metallic. They definitely ramp up things. And then we do have the scream, the harsh vocal after the shotgun cocking sound. So there are certainly more metallic elements in it. But I think these two songs do a great job of bringing the intensity down so that we can complete the circle of, starting at a lower intensity, going to a higher one, and bringing it full circle to a lower intensity finale. And Cold Death does a great job transitioning into that, and Perfect 10 just runs with it. Very straightforward track here. Found that to be rather enjoyable. I do have one really big question. How do you get a Vocaloid to do harsh vocals? I don't know if anyone in here actually has that answer. I may end up just doing a YouTube search and seeing if I can find a video tutorial on it. I'm really curious because the first one we heard it in, I think the first time I've ever heard, maybe not the first time I've ever heard, because I'm pretty sure my kid has shown me a song with some harsh Vocaloid stuff in it. But the first song from Utsu-P that we heard it in was Gorgon, track 3. And to me, there's a section, it's very clear that this is a Vocaloid, and there's some effects put on it to do this, or at least that's how I perceive it. But here in track 12, the scream that comes after the shotgun cocking, it kind of sounds legit. There's like 5 to 10% of the sound where I'm like, okay, there's definitely some tweaking going on here on a production level. It doesn't sound completely raw like a person making this sound, but it's infinitely more convincing than any of the other harshes we've heard on this track. So I'm curious about it now. How do you go about doing that? Is it built into the software, or are they having to... I can't imagine, because Vocaloid software, as far as I know, is mostly tuned and crafted for pop music, for electronic music. This almost feels as if it's being utilized for a metal framework, not designed for it, but certainly found a way to make it work within that framework. I just have no idea how you would do that. And if it's not in the software and they're using effects to do that, how close could we turn a recording? Because all this is just sampled human voices. Could I just sing a song, or sing, I guess, a tone? Could I just transform that into a harsh vocal? How difficult would that be? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. My harshes have improved. I think I can rely on them if I chose to use them in a song, but it's still just a technique to have in your pocket. Otherwise, though, I think this is a great way to wrap up the album, but I keep getting curious about the bonus track, especially since I've been told that it completes the album better. It's only 3 minutes. I think we're going to do it. Let me get some lyrics down for these two first, though. This is an interesting track that bounces between two main ideas. One being that this person has come to the realization that being in the human body is cold and hurts and they hate it and it's tacky and it's awful and it's boring. Says that they're just machines that happen to have blood circulating through them. But there's another part of this song that focuses on the fact that people like positive things in their life. And I don't know how that's a bad thing, but it reads as bad to me. He says, we only seek pleasant things. In a daze we comfort each other and graze until our strings are yanked. Our freeze-dried selves in the shape of humans, completely reduced to husks, have had their initiative deleted. We only want what's recommended for us, and everything that's given to us is perfect for us. It talks about how we've become complacent, and we are basically just a big pipe for our food to get to our stomach. Although I see the negativity in this now. At first, I was like, of course people want positive things. Why would people seek out negative things? But I think it's less about just positive, and maybe it was something that was lost in translation, and maybe more about complacency. That he's tired of simply being complacent. That as long as it's one of our baser instincts or something that's shiny and will distract us for a moment, we will fall for it. It will absolutely work at making us feel better for the moment, and it'll help us not care about other things. He basically, well, as he says, we have lost our initiative. It's been deleted from us. He says at one point, all that he can think of, the only words in his head, are negative words and abusive language. He seems to be this distanced from humanity as a whole. All he can think is negative thoughts about them. So musically, this one was a bit darker in composition, but lighter in complexity, but it's still focused on a really heavy topic. You may not remember this. I barely caught this when I was reading the lyrics way back when, in track 1. It mentioned something about searching for an effect. So I went back and I read track 1's lyrics again, and the whole thing was about pushing forward no matter what, and that eventually hoping that you can, he says he wants to turn whatever this is living, whatever living is, into a success. He says, I'm searching for an effect that will bring something into being. This idea of searching for an effect is brought up in the final sentence of this track. They talk about being outside of the limits, the forbidden, outside power and boundary and margin. It says that if you notice the outside, you'll see that everything is on the other side. It says, I just want to be admired, called, and wanted. That alone creates an effect. And this ties it so perfectly into the first track. The rest of the song is about realizing you're outside of the norm. You're on the other side. At one point saying, I used to think I wasn't on the other side, but one day I suddenly became it. Did I realize it, or did I collapse because of a gap? From the cracks I stare inward like a digital selfie, watching people who seem to be having fun. Images flow everywhere. People, works, everyone looks this way, yet none of them are the viewer. It is once again feeling ostracized from everyone else. It's the core concept of so much of this album is I need to reach a point where I'm happy, and that happiness, time and again, is connection with people. We have seen songs that explore connection that has failed and has traumatized someone and had them close up so as to never open themselves up again. But we have just as many songs and more focusing on people who want that connection but can't get it because of social class, because of perceived beauty, because of awkwardness, because of personality. Lots of reasons that would make someone, or at least in their mind, separate them from others to an extent that makes connection difficult or impossible. And here at the very end of the album, we have somebody who is on the outside and finds that that's just so different from everyone else's experience. Says people and everyone, they look this specific way. None of them are the viewer, not like I am. I have fallen through the cracks. I am on the other side of things. I view what's going on here. It provides a type of power. It says it felt as if I had become a god. It created this birth of a watcher, someone who could perceive everything around them. But they still want to be admired. They still want to be wanted. They still want that connection. They don't get it. But it does end up affecting them in a way that is quite unique. Something they were searching for from the very first track is presented here in effect. Something that would push them to become something more, something new. The way I read these lyrics is somewhat bittersweet. A realization of your dreams at the expense of your humanity. But I also wonder if there isn't supposed to be some sort of positivity in this as well, that so much of this album has been finding self-worth through others. And here in the final moments, they have elevated themselves. There is still a sad point. They don't necessarily feel as fulfilled as I think they would want at this moment. But they find some sort of power in it. That through all of this journey, they have eventually reached a conclusion of something more. The music is a little both. There's negativity to it, there's positivity, the music's a bit bittersweet. There's also the shotgun cocking and the scream, which is never a great thing. And that actually brings another idea into this. He mentions at one day, I didn't even notice it, and I was just on the other side. When did this happen? But the shotgun cocking and the scream, they could be quite intentional as well, talking about moving to the other side, becoming a watcher. Someone who fell through a gap and is now on the outside of everyone else. I don't think there's too much in the lyrics that really support it, but with so much intentionality to the sonic elements in this album, it's tough not to read into the only place that a gun sound effect has been used. At the same time, someone sings about being, moving to the other side and looking at this world from beyond it. And this puts me in a pickle here, because I do find this to be a perfect way to wrap this up. Musically, we've come full circle. Lyrically, we've come full circle. And yet, the requester still says that OGRE is the perfect finale for the album. A song that came out 4 years prior to the album. it is just 3.5 minutes. We're going to do it simply because my curiosity cannot be contained. But I will be incredibly surprised if this doesn't undo what Perfect 10 has already cleaned up and wrapped up in a bow really nicely. Let's dive into it and see what's going on with OGRE. Now, I can't find the remastered version for this, which is, I don't know how much that's going to affect things. I don't know how different it is, if it's a remix or just it touched up on the sonic side of things. But apparently it's only on the CD version, not on the digital version. So we are listening to the one from the 2021 album, Unique. Let's dive into it and see what's up. That's... Apparently this is Hatsune Miku, but it's a different range, different inflections than what we have heard from Hatsune Miku on other tracks. Musically, it's drastically different. Wow, talk about a drastic swing. All right. Here's the thing. That's a solid track. I like it. It probably works really well in the album it's in. I don't know. I haven't listened to Unique, but it's catchy. I like the syncopation on the guitars, the big timpanis plus string thing that's going on the outskirts of it sounds great. The chorus is catchy. It's got nice brass in it. Like, I'm down with this song. It sounds great. It's the same level of production and care to sound and atmosphere that I expect from Utsu-P. But it does not belong anywhere near the other 12 songs we listened to. The sonic palette is totally different. It's in a completely different key than anything else we've listened to on this track. It focuses on a brightness without any sort of the bittersweet element. Even on the pop rock tracks on this album, they're combined with something a bit heavier or grittier to it, whether it is a vocal production technique or an instrument choice or production on an instrument to make them bigger or louder or more bassy. There's always something that brings down the more positive sides to this. This is a song, though, that's completely bright. The guitars have very little weight to them. They do have size, that's for sure, but the harmonic palette in the guitar licks are positive, kind of bouncy. Down, 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 down. I mean, that's our opening riff right there. And granted, that's not the heavy guitar, but it still sets the mood for the entirety of the song. And that rhythm ends up being put into the vocals in the beginning of the chorus as well. Da 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 da. It's very bright, very chirpy, very optimistic. And the epic instrumentation around it elevates that. It does bring in a little bit of gravitas. It tries to root and ground this feeling of lifting off, but it is overwhelmingly a very positive sounding song. The bridge is not a great idea, though. I think in isolation, it's fine. The harsh vocals sound great. The instrumentation that plays with it sounds great, but how we get there is awkward, and how we come out of it makes no sense. That was a massive shift and reminded me of track 7 and 8 on this one, which are just jumping between random ideas. I think that generally this album has flowed rather well. The transitions have been good. I'm not going to say any of them are fantastic, but it never really felt, other than track 7 and 8, like we were channel surfing and just jumping between different ideas. And that's exactly what happens there. The bridge comes out of nowhere. It's not harmonically supported. It's not melodically supported. It's just a cool, hey, dude, you weren't expecting this, were you? Kind of moment. And that can be fun, for sure. But I just don't know that it was pulled off well here. And it really is the only blemish on this track. Everything else works really well. Maybe lyrically it'll make sense, but it just kind of comes out of nowhere and then it's gone. But overall, musically, this is not a good finale. Perfect 10 wraps this album up wonderfully. Revisiting sounds, revisiting lyrics, and just kind of bringing everything full circle in every way that it can. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if there aren't any themes present on Perfect 10 that showed up in the opening track. The Berserk gene, maybe just on a different instrument, something a little bit lighter, maybe a slightly different key, just to shift that up, because I do think that the Berserk gene was very energetic and driving, not necessarily positive, but edgy, whereas Perfect 10 has more of a bittersweet feeling to it. But it's possible to adapt a melody between styles like that, between keys and harmonic devices. So that actually wouldn't surprise me if there actually were some more musical carryovers between those two tracks, because everything else about them feels like a circle coming to fruition. And OGRE breaks the circle and decides to teleport into a very different direction. Solid track, like I said, in isolation. It doesn't belong in Perfect Persona, though. But I was told that the lyrics are what tie everything together. So let's check those out on OGRE and see what's going on there. There are multiple stanzas on this track that describe everyday people being consumed by a monster. It says this is an everyday that's so empty, it's amazing. In front of the station echoed a speech and a hit song. While good-for-nothing words were being spouted, a monster arrived and ate them all. The claims of a shady stranger who stinks of urine and the songs that appeal to other people's weaknesses were all eaten in the blink of an eye. That singer that you liked and the saints who sold their ideas, a monster arrived and ate them. Says I was eaten in the blink of an eye in a classroom. A guy who didn't seem like the one I was listening to was a teacher trembling at wit's end. They were eaten as well. Talks about just every day a monster appears in normal life and begins consuming everyone and everything. Then there's the chorus, though. Labor and learn. Let truth be all that remains. God or Buddha only provide mere consolation. With overwhelming vigor, destroy the pretentiousness of people. And I think this is where things begin to settle in. That this person wants the monster to come by and eat everyone because they find humanity pretentious. It kind of overlaps a little bit with the themes of Perfect Persona. The idea of someone feeling outside of everyone else and just not having that emotional connection, but everything in Perfect Persona is about developing that connection, about wanting it, needing it, craving it, and trying to be someone who would be worthy of connection with others. That's what Perfect Persona ends up meaning, the album name itself, about crafting someone, even if it's not who you really are, that people would want to be around, because who you are, or at least in the stories in the album, the person that's singing, they always view themselves as negative, as, you know, a hornet who just has poison, as a monster not worth loving, someone who is toxic and ugly and monstrous. They find it difficult to connect with people, so they are trying to find a way to connect to people despite all this, even if they have to change who they are, if they have to change, I mean, what was it? KUCHISAKE. The song about the person who thought they were a monster said, I would even let you slice my face open, referencing the folklore of that creature, if you would tell me I'm beautiful. Perfect persona, crafting who you are, changing who you are to fit others in order to be well liked. To make a persona of yourself that is perfect for society. This is a song about reveling in the downfall of society to a larger power. And there is even a moment at the end of the song where it says there's no such thing as monsters. They're nothing more than a metaphor. They're needlessly huge. There's nothing other than reality and calamity. And I'm waking up. The song disappears in the wind. It's all a daydream. All of this that felt really good to this person, about these people getting their comeuppance, about society being destroyed. They all thought it was worthwhile to do what they were doing, and the narrator just couldn't get along with any of that. Society gets destroyed and they revel in it. And they get upset that they wake up to find out it's a dream. Yeah, this doesn't gel well with the stories of Perfect Persona. It doesn't gel well with Perfect 10. Unless I'm really missing something here. And if you're the person who requested this album, let me know. if I'm missing something here. But I just don't see how this song fits in the album. This is a bonus track, 100%. Now, maybe the remastered version has sonic elements to it that match this album's sonic palette a little bit better, but lyrically, assuming nothing's changed there, I don't know. At the end of the song, we revisit the chorus. Labor and learn. Let life be all that remains here. God and Buddha are worthless. Even if your mind and your heart shatter and your hands are all that's left that won't let go, with overwhelming vigor, defeat this world and those monsters. It does try to take this into a more positive direction. To never give up. To just keep fighting against the monsters, but it doesn't say what the monsters are or who, unless the monsters are the people that they've looked upon so poorly. There are several sections in here where it almost seems as if they're mocking the people that they're describing. Does he think that humanity are the monsters, or that the monsters are elements of society? It doesn't really say. It's left open to interpretation, and you really can take it in any different way you want. The idea of fighting for what you want in this world kind of does line up with Perfect Persona, but only by the way of being vague enough to encompass somebody who is trying their best to be liked, because that is them fighting for something they want. So, I don't know, dude. I'd really like to know someone's perspective on this, if they view this to be integral to the experience of Perfect Persona, because I'm simply not seeing it, despite the song being good by itself. And that's going to wrap up my thoughts here on Utsu-P's Perfect Persona. What did you think of this album? Did anything stand out to you? Is there anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own thoughts, opinions, perspectives on this. Please put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC. I think that's accurate. We're going to do a live stream. Usually goes for about 2.5 hours. We just chill, hang out, listen to some good music, have some good conversation. It's very laid back, and it's a good time to engage. Wow. Good time to engage with the community. Really using some good PR terms there. It's a good time to chat with people in the community, though. There's some really good conversations and discussions that are had during the live streams, and it is a blast. You can find those over on twitch.tv on the channel name Critical Composer, because Critical Reactions was already taken, which is wild. Anyways, though, I'm not bitter about that. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.